And we're live for TNT Education Session number one, leading up to Sector Summits 2024. We're very excited to have you all here today to learn a little bit more about pitching your life sciences based company. And who better to walk us through that than our esteemed panelists and guests today. And I'm going to kick off with our first guest, who is a big supporter of Startup TNT, big supporter of the life sciences ecosystem as a whole. She's a doctor and an adjunct assistant professor with the Department of Medicine, and also leads the Health Innovation Hub at the University of Alberta. She's got over 20 years experience in academia and a rich background in the business, and recently won an award for Connector of the Year from the Edmonton Startup Award. So who better to talk about pitching than someone who's got all this experience working so hard in the ecosystem than Dr. Paramita. So thank you for being here, and I will pass it off to you and tell us a little bit more about API and all the wonderful work you've been doing with life sciences companies and how to make a great pitch.
Thank you so much, Jesse. Hello, everyone. It's been a pleasure. It is something that is very close to my heart, pitching. Many people do not know, but I actually started my second career in the innovation industry by working for a life sciences startup. And I pitched for the company at Startup TNT's Great Alberta Pitch Marathon. And I did an abysmal job of it because I was stuttering and this and that, and a whole lot of things happened. But that has been the solidifying factor for how close I am to the needs for life sciences companies and how much appreciative I am for API and TNT to come together to do this. So I'm going to share my screen here. And we will go through a few short slides of the life sciences pitching principles for life sciences companies. And I thought that I am going to break up my presentation into two bits. And first, to give you a sense of API and who we are and what we do, and then go into some of the pitching principles. So, Life Sciences Investment Summit is something which is a partnership between TNT and API. API, or Applied Pharmaceutical Innovation, is Alberta's largest not-for-profit life sciences organization. And we do this by bridging the gap between academic research and commercial development, building capacity, and eliminating barriers for SMEs, industries, and innovators. And we do have space across Alberta. So here you see three of our establishments that do not have the University of Alberta's main campus, where we operate out of a core lab in the Faculty of Pharmacy. So API's downtown campus, which is Enterprise Square, where I'm located, the BBDC building, and then the Calgary Life Sciences Innovation Hub. So we operate on Indigenous lands in territories 6, 7, and 8, and across Alberta. So moving on to something which is started in 2023, actually, the Canadian Critical Drug Initiative. So some of the people in this meeting might already have heard about the CCDI. So this is a collaboration which is led by API in partnership with the University of Alberta to create an integrated research, commercialization, and manufacturing hub in the Edmonton metro region. And it is coming up in in the southern part of Edmonton, near the Edmonton Research Park. And it's very the plans are all happening. It's going to be an enormous sort of momentum to bring the life sciences ecosystem and to really galvanize the life sciences ecosystem in the whole of Alberta. So API has several activities, but our core activities are in three main buckets. The first one is about providing industry with the opportunities that they need to access world-class expertise and services. And here industries are those SMEs, they are the early stage innovators. In many cases, these are also larger companies who are looking to connect with academics or connect with expertise which is located in-house at API or with our partner networks. The other bucket is to support researchers and startups to create a viable path forward. And that is through, again, several different verticals that API has. And the third bucket is training and empowering postdoctoral fellows and students. And that is the next generation workforce for the life sciences industry. Because without having trained workforce, it's very difficult to move the industry forward. It's also very critical to become the economic developer, to be able to invite other companies to come in, because talent is always something essential. And API provides the talent with the work integrated learning opportunities, hands-on working with industry, so that they can bridge that gap between academic research and industrial research. Since launching in 2018, API has worked in more than 75 industry projects and has supported over 50 SMEs, scale-ups, spin-off companies. We have actually created over $500 million in value for these life sciences companies, with a large number of network experts and advisors and a large staff member as well. And this just gives you a snapshot of our ecosystem partners, amongst which, for whatever reason, this slide needs to be updated. I do not see TNT, which is one of our major ecosystem partners. So moving on to how do we assist companies? So if we look at the pathway often takes a long time. So we can see here, anything from a novel compound to a medical device, the pathways vary. And there is a lot of investment needed. If you're talking about novel compounds, therapeutics, it's billions of dollars of investment. If you're thinking medical devices, that's not so much, but still there's quite significant investment needed. And this investment is needed from bench to bedside. So completing the entire pathway, becoming the state of the art, from research all the way on to commercialization operations. And what happens is many companies fail during this first part of it, when they're going from research to the clinical development stage. And this failure is because either they have lack of access to expertise or experience, maybe they do not have an incubator space where they can try it on, then maybe they do not know how to manufacture something which is going to be acceptable for a clinical trial. May that be a medical device, may that be a biologic. And then funding is also something which is very critical, and that is something that we are addressing through the TNT Life Sciences Investment Summit. So API offers concrete expertise and experience, and we have blocked it into 3 different buckets: technical and lab-based, ecosystem and training, scientific and business. And if we look at it, this has got a ton of information, and I'm not going to take you through it. This is just here to give a sense of how API's leadership team's experience directly correlates to leading these buckets, and where we help with technical supporting people in synthesis, in manufacturing, analytical testings, training programs, understanding ecosystem, and how do you go about doing an event, scientific and business services such as regulatory, clinical services, compliance, biostatistics, and a whole lot more. And talking about the innovation ecosystem and incubation, API has a memorandum of understanding with the University of Alberta, where it leads the operations for the Health Innovation Hub, which is the University of Alberta's lead life sciences and health incubator for innovators, entrepreneurs who are working towards better human health outcomes. We do have quite a large, significant number of companies which are in the hub. Several of them are in our virtual hub. Several of them are located in the office space itself. And as you can see from this, they are over a plethora. So this slide itself shows how API can support companies in the life sciences across sectors to navigate and understand what is needed to become a commercial success. And a final slide about one of our programs. It's an inaugural pilot that we launched this year. So it was over 6 months, July to December, and there were 10 companies, 6 coaches with more than 150 years of collective experience amongst them, who were able to do one-to-one engagements with all of these 10 companies to help them go through how would you do a successful pitch? And there were many things in there around case studies. The companies had opportunities to practice pitching and then get feedback from these friendly judges, and then also opportunities to network. So with that small snapshot of what API does and what we have been doing since we have started our operations in 2018, let's dive into pitching principles for life sciences companies. And I would start off with something which talks about what makes a compelling pitch. So the most important thing here, and everybody probably is appreciative of it, is grabbing the attention of the audience. So that is not something that happens very seamlessly, because it has to be dependent, and you have to know what you want to say and how you're going to say it. So taking them on a clear and logical journey and leaving them with a compelling call to action. That is something which is very, very critical. What in pitch terms we call the ask. So this is, I like this because it breaks down what a pitch is. It's a problem solver. So there has to be a problem that somebody is solving with a solution. Then there's going to be an action which is inspired. So you have to have an end goal. It's not a talk about just rambling on and talking about this is what we are going to do or whatever. There has to be, what are we looking for? Because pitching is different from presentations. Pitching is very much tailored to the audience. It has to be concise, to be quick, to the point, and there has to be passion in it. Without heart, which is what the H stands for in pitch, it is very, very difficult to come across as someone that investors are going to be excited about. So the life sciences company, so every company has to do pitching. If you don't do pitching, you are not going to be successful for to an investor. And then there are where you're pitching, and then there's where you are providing them with documents. In any case, a life sciences company has got certain different needs than, say, just a SaaS company or a company which is in the fintech, because there's 4 different components that makes up this life sciences rule book. And they are product market fit, regulatory compliance, business readiness, and product development. And all 4 buckets have 4 different things and components associated with it. For instance, understanding what your need statement is. That need statement is very important. Doing primary research, finding out this is my need, which is currently a gap, and my product can support this need. That is something very important. Understanding the end user feedback as well. Regulatory compliance is something that I cannot talk enough about, because unless and until there's communication with regulatory bodies such as Health Canada or FDA, people do not really know what that pathway looks like. And that has to start early, because it cannot be that I would be doing a lot of work on research and neglecting regulatory compliance. Then the business readiness section is something which is connected to any. So it's not something which is critical to life sciences, but life sciences companies need to think about this. A lot of times, because it's deep tech, they think about just the research and forget that it's actually a business. And so there are things in here. One which is very critical, particularly in Canada, is the reimbursement strategy. If somebody is thinking about eventually making it accessible through the public system, How are you going to get that? How are you going to get paid for the service that you are offering? That is the reimbursement strategy, and that needs to be added on into the entire story. And then we do have the product development, where you're talking about how much funding have you raised? Have you done beta testing? Things like that. So there's unique needs for this life sciences pitch deck, and these are to address all four components somewhere in the pitch. So it doesn't have to be set up in these individual buckets, but there are different ways. There are different pitch deck templates. I know TNT has a whole lot of different resources that they can provide as well, but the components need to be addressed. Even if you have not thought about it, but at least like this is something, this is the critical thing we acknowledge that we have to look into it. That is also critical for the investors to be aware that you understand what you are getting into. And the second point is, please do not go deep into science. When you're talking about, oh, this is all and a lot of data and a lot of graphs, and I'm a scientist, I know how hard it can be to actually, from someone who is a layperson, to see deep science and to be able to analyze what does a Western blot look like with graphs that you have, it becomes very complex. So pitching is not a presentation that you're giving to peers. Pitching is taking people on a journey of excitement with you so that at the end, they're going to be able to understand the ask and act on it. I'm going to, for the sake of time, just move on to talk about TAM, SAM, SOM. Many people know this, but I have seen examples of people talking about, oh, the total market, addressable market, is so much billions of dollars, and then leave it at that. But well, that market is not yours to capture. Depending upon who your audience is and how you're going to go about it, there's something called a serviceable available market. That is the market to capture, and people need to think about that as well. Be a storyteller. Capture the attention of the audience. You have to end with a bang as well. Be complete control. Talk about something. And why is being a storyteller so important? Well, because a well-made story has got an engagement component to it. It's relevant. There's always something or the other going on. So it always is very important. Remember, pitch has to be concise and very fast. So pitching and storytelling goes well together because it helps to be relatable and personal, and then releases tension. And at the end, we are all here to have fun. So you don't have to think about hard facts that you have to memorize. You can just go with the flow and just enjoy it. And if you do not get it right and you stutter and stumble a little, it's okay. 5 key strategies, because you have to know your audience, and otherwise you would not be able to keep it personal or to minimize the distractions. So these are the things that you need to be able to have a really compelling, and there's 3 things I have in here, which I'm very quickly going to show. The stories can be in 3 different ways. One of them is the protagonist story. So talk about your why. Why are you doing what you're doing? So it talks about it as you are the protagonist, you have identified a problem, and now you're taking it forward. Makes it very personal. The other way could be the customer's tale. So, how somebody who has used your product has found it to solve their problem that they have. So that is very good to show traction. So you can also be using the customer's tale and make it again personal and relatable. And the third one that I have here is the industry story, and talk about how your product is changing the state of the art, how industry has been doing it one way, but your product is changing the entire industry's perspective. So this is disruption, radical disruption. And if you have a disruptive product, this could be your story. So with that, thank you so much for your attention, and I will pass it over to Jesse.
Thank you so much, Dr. Paramita. Round of applause there on that presentation to kick off today's session. So many things for us to unpack there, and who better to join us today than one of our previous winners of the TNT Summit, not the Life Sciences Summit, but she is running a life sciences company. Dr. Sabina is the CEO of Nimble Science, and she's got over 20 years experience in the medical technology industry with a Bachelor of Science in Mechanical Engineering and a PhD in Biomedical Engineering. She also previously co-founded another company called Zephyr Sleep Technologies. So lots of experience here. Thank you for being here today, Sabina.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Awesome. And we have to round out our panel. We got to bring in a venture capitalist, and who better than our friends over at Yaletown Partners, the man who actually brought Zach Storms and Tim Lin together by telling them to go check out the happy hour. We have the managing partner of or the investment manager at Yaletown Partners. He's got over 20 years experience in the private and public sector. He's very active in the space. He works with University of Alberta's venture mentoring services. He's an executive coach and former business owner himself. So we're very welcome and thankful today to have Arden Tse here with us.
Thanks, John. Good to be here.
All right. Sabina, I'm going to start with you. Thinking about what we just heard there from Paramita around the pitching in particular. She mentioned, pitching is an important aspect of building your business. You can't forget about it. Why, as a founder who's now built a couple of businesses and been quite successful here in building Nimble Science and getting investment, why is pitching so critical and building a great pitch deck so critical to the success of your business?
Yeah, I mean, I would say it's one of the things that I struggled a lot with to rein the business into a story that fits into a deck and that you can tell. I think it's the way that you communicate. It's the handshake. I think that you are conveying a lot about who you are, where you're going, what the tech supports and what the market's interested in. But it's really so much of your personality. And when you make that connection with an investor or a partner, because the pitching isn't just for money. I mean, I think I pitch half the day. I'm pitching to the team. I'm pitching to our customers. I'm pitching to our partnerships. I'm pitching to, leaseholders. You're constantly kind of telling people like, this is who you are and this is what you're doing. And I think the pitch is conveying a little bit about who you are as a person and what your company's about. And it's really the way of extending trust. And if you can create that trust barrier, then the story starts to unravel. And so underlying every, Paramita went into detail about, the regulatory piece, and all of that is really just about trust. Can they trust you? Can you be trusted? Can you trust the technology? Can you trust the market? So yeah, it's the first element of trust.
Yeah. And so you got to build that trust with investors like Arden. So coming to you, Arden, when you're getting that pitch deck initially, what are you really looking for in that deck, especially with a life sciences based company?
That's there's no one easy answer to that question because it really depends on the stage and the type of life sciences company you are. But I think the first thing we want to look for, and you have to excuse my voice, I'm recovering from a nasty cough I got last week. I'm not going through puberty again. I'm a little bit for that. But really, it is a really compelling understanding of what you're working on, right? What's the problem you're solving? And depending on the stage you're at, how well you've thought about the potential exit. You have to remember, every investor must be asked the same question of anything they're looking at. How do I make money? How do I get a return on this investment? And so depending on the kind of technology company you are, or the kind of life sciences company you are, you've got to outline your thought about, what's the path to your growth and how you're eventually going to make a return for your investors. It's not always commercialization. There are companies, especially if you are in small molecules, pharmaceuticals, biotech, you just need good data. And if you can show good data and show that, you've thought about who's going to acquire that and who needs it, or if you're already in discussions or have a strategic investor already, that's one way to do it. If you're, because they'll often be the ones, or same with medical devices. There are some types of companies where you don't need to commercialize. You get to get to a point where one of the big players in the industry would acquire you and commercialize. So you have to show that you understand what their need is. Or it might be that you do have a sales force and you know how you're going to do those sales, because you're tapped into a specific care network, or you have a relationship with a group of healthcare providers in the U.S. So no matter what it is, you have to. I think the number one thing for any investor to really be sold on is that you know or have some idea of the trajectory of your company and how you're going to get out, because that's the only way an investor is going to be interested, is understanding. Nobody wants to put money into something where, well, we're really not sure how we're going to make money. We just want to grow and save lives. Well, that's great, but I have a duty to the people whose money I'm managing, to be able to figure out how we're going to make a return for them. And I also want to give a shout out to my brother Andrew out there. No, he's not actually my brother, but it's very rare I see somebody with the same last name. So I wanted to say hi.
Awesome. Thanks, Arden. I'm going to come back to Sabina quick, and then we're going to go over to Paramita. Just following up there, what Arden said about, building your pitch deck and thinking about exit. How did you, when you were first getting started, how did you even start entering into that, thought experiment, for building out your pitch deck?
About the exit and the monetization. I mean, for us, it's difficult because we're in the deep tech space. We are in that future sort of this, this has a place in the world, and it isn't like this is the widget, this is who's going to want the widget. And so there, I think the best for us, it was about partnerships. These are the companies that are interested. These are the companies that want this data. And demonstrating traction and really focusing the pitch, having the logos on there, having their permission to have the logos on there, and having partnerships established to say, we don't really know where this is going, but these are all the different types of people that want this data. We're at an early stage, so we don't have all the answers. We're not, but we've got things thought through. And then on the flip side, so on the one side, it's a lot of arm waving, but then on the flip side, it's like, these are our margins, these are our COGS, these are the costs, this is what it's going to take, and the very specifics of the stage that we are in to show that there's that sort of, we can bridge that gap between, right now we are operating on a specifics for where we're at, and then there's this bigger picture. But as Arden said, it's every story is different, and every story is going to need, but you have to convey that you're thinking about money, you're motivated by that exit, because that is what has to happen when you take in investment. There has to be that way to monetize the investment, and there's a lot of ways to convey that.
Awesome. Paramita, so thinking about what we've just heard there from Arden and Sabina, how what do you think our founders should be doing to properly prepare for that conversation, right? Like how and what have you been able to do in terms of coaching and working with the founders around this area of their pitch deck?
Right. So some of these, I was taking notes as we were talking, and Sabina had, she mentioned trust, and that's something which is so critical in that that early stage investor connectivities. And there's the other one that Arden talked about, which was, how are you going to make money? And because an investment company such as Yaletown is taking and raising money, and they have got that to think about, the exit is something which is very important. Just the fact that you're saving lives is not enough. So what we are doing is I had showed about the life sciences venture coaching, for instance, and that is the coaches who are there in the life sciences venture coaching, for instance, they worked with companies, startups, scale-ups, they've raised capital, they have done successful exits. They are the ones who are training these companies on how to think about these things. Because one of the things that we have found often is when you are bringing a lot of people together who are themselves in the ideation, in the early stage entrepreneurship, the startups, many of them, they learn through examples. They learn by talking to one another. They learn by listening to people who have done this, rather than just learning through books and things like that. Like that definitely works, but it's faster if you are learning from someone who says, oh, don't do this. I've made this mistake, and this is not where it leads. So hearing from Sabina talking about trust is very important. So in that program, we bring together these people who can give them those learnings from their experiences. At the same time, we bring them into several networking events and opportunities where they directly connect to people such as investors to have that initial relationship building happening so that these investors can tell them from the beginning what they're looking for. They can start building on the trust that is needed because people work with people. And after all, even if you're creating a solid business, unless and until you're approachable, you're coachable, you are going to be someone I want to go out for a dinner or want to know more about you, I probably wouldn't invest in your company. And so having those earlier engagements is so critical in building that trust. So just I will stop there. There's a lot more to unpack, but just to talk about those two things that both Arden and Sabina said, and how life sciences venture coaching addresses those two things.
Yeah, thank you, Paramita. Yeah, I absolutely agree. It's you gotta surround yourself with the right people. That's what we do here at Startup TNT. Our model: have fun, make friends, build companies. The happy hours are another great place to create that network of people around you. Um, Thinking about what you mentioned there in the presentation, I'm going to go to Arden here. Market sizing, right? That's one of the biggest and most important things that we think about as investors. But all too often you see that slide, and it seems like it's like all kinds of crazy numbers. $1 trillion market. I've never seen a slide deck that didn't have a big market. But how should life sciences companies be thinking about doing that market sizing exercise and conveying that message to investors in a way that actually resonates with those investors?
Well, I think first of all early stage investors know that market assessments are really a bit of a work of art and a work of fiction. But what we want to see is potential. The nice thing about life sciences, though, is it's very well defined, right? You can actually talk about certain patient populations, number of lives impacted. You can look into numbers on how much is being spent on a certain, like, again, whether you're in therapeutics, diagnostics, if you're a medical device, or if you are in digital health. Digital health is more akin to software, and so that's a little bit different. But I would say traditionally for most, like it's not that hard to be able to do a bit of research into where the impact of what you're doing can be going, right? Because you're addressing a very specific health need. Um, and that's really, I think, as long as you start building from there and showing where you got those numbers from. One thing I really do love about life sciences is that, if you can show good data and you're solving a problem which is generally to do with the health of a population, even if it's like in the rare disease area, there's a big population because it's global, it's people. I also wanted to mention that that is also something that is a strength when you're using. We talk about, Paramita talked about making this personal, right, and having impact in your pitch. Well, the fact is, when you're talking about human problems, when you're talking about health and human issues, it's very easy to make that hit home in talking about, have you ever, and we all know somebody who may have some sort of issue that is associated with what you're doing. Or it may be that it's easy to imagine this problem. Like, imagine if you, had an open sore on your foot that you weren't even aware of for months. Like, these are things that are immensely relatable versus software, which isn't always, doesn't always hit home. So don't be afraid to dive into that and make your audience feel the problem because they're human problems at the end of the day. But as far as, as market sizing goes, there's no one size fits all. It really comes down to, one thing that I learned from venture philanthropy, and this is from the Draper Academy, is they like to look at number of lives impacted. I think that's a very powerful way to present the possibilities for your technology, your solution. So that might be something that you can link to as well. As far as economics go, it is a bit misleading too, in that you have to understand there's so many complexities, because it might be a big market, but what are the margins like when you're doing your reimbursement strategy for especially in the US? Are your margins going to make it worthwhile for a physician or whoever you're working with to then prescribe your solution? Are doctors going to be willing to refer your solution or get patients for your clinical trials when there is a large incumbent who's doing something similar? And I was actually talking to Ryan Height of Pasolix yesterday about this, where they're having a challenge with they show really good results with one of their solutions, but there's a bigger player in that sector, and even though their solution isn't as elegant, we'll say, or as effective, because it's a big name, doctors are going to refer their patients to their phase ones versus Pasolix, which is an interesting problem to have. So you have to understand that in terms of your ability to penetrate the market, it's not just about the market size. So I think that's a bit of a quality you want to be able to show you have some understanding of, right? A huge market makes no difference if you can't get into it, I guess is the point. Whereas a smaller market can be fine if you have an ability to own the whole thing.
Wow. Yeah. So much great advice in there, Arden. I hope people are taking notes. We also record it so you can watch it again. Sabina, coming to you there on that similar topic, and then I'll get to the question that just came up in the chat. As you were going through this process, right, and trying to develop, what your market sizing, maybe walk us through like how did you do that, and also how did you go through the process of sort of making iterations on your pitch deck and your storytelling?
Okay, well, the two are closely tied. I guess we did a lot of iterations on our market sizing. It's difficult because we're in a space that doesn't exist. We're not replacing something that's currently being done. It's really a new approach, and so it was very difficult to benchmark that. We did it a little bit based on the size of the number of people impacted, so the number of people with the condition, less about the sort of dollars specific to our device. It was more like, this is the money being spent on diagnostics in this area, and these are the deficiencies with the diagnostics. And so everyone could kind of do the math that within that big number, there was some potential for a piece in there. We also looked at like similar types of activities. So for us, it's stool testing and the amount of money that's being spent on sequencing, the amount of innovation, the amount of investment dollars that's going into that space to improve sequencing. And so you can kind of understand that there's movement and excitement in that space. But for us, it was very difficult. And I think we still struggle with that, with that market sizing piece. As the company matures and as our path matures, it becomes a little bit more difficult. As for the iteration of the deck, I actually I was so struggling going around and round in circles in terms of the story that was in my head versus the story that I had to tell. And then recognize that it was actually very much tied to weaknesses in our business plan. And so going back to the business plan and really focusing on the business plan and then using that to translate into the story. I think so many times we start with the deck and not with the business plan. And then from there, sitting down with some trusted people in the ecosystem. Crystal Phillips and I tell the story all the time. I showed up on her doorstep on a Friday afternoon and asked for a beer and a whiteboard. And I said, I just need to tell this. And then she just hounded me like, who cares? Who's the person? Who are you talking to? Why are they doing that? And she just kept hounding until we sort of refined the story. And then from there, I just, you kept telling it. I gave it to some of our early investors. They sent it back to me with a complete like redo. I mean, it was brutal. It was a brutal 3 months of being sent back to the whiteboard over and over again. And then, in the end, I think the story came together and we changed the color of the deck of the background from black to white. I'm not kidding you. That was like, and then all of a sudden it just, we sent it out to a graphic designer. Things got cleaned up, streamlined. And it was just pitching to 1 million people, my kids included, until the extra words dropped off and the story got cleaner and cleaner and cleaner. And that was at the beginning. That was over the summer. We did the summit in November. That process was April through August, I think. We were still throwing out pitch decks and restarting. And then the transitions that happened, we were probably doing 3 pitch deck revs a week between September and November. Every time we talked to an investor, every time something didn't make sense, every time something didn't resonate, you got to look at their faces and they'll tell you where they're like, I don't understand why you're even saying this, or I don't believe what you're saying. And so, the next time you're trying something new. So it's just iterative doesn't do it justice. It's so iterative. And you got to watch a person's face and look for their feedback. What's making sense? And when are they getting excited? When are they leaning forward? And then really hone in on those pieces. It's a very emotional exercise. It's draining.
I love it. I love the story there. This is, a great example of, what you need to do to, and why folks say it, building the founding of a company, building a company it's a lot of hard work, a lot of things that you've got to hold loosely, so that you can continue to make those changes and iterations. Yeah, so many great nuggets of wisdoms coming in from our panelists here. I'm gonna play on the question there. I think Sabina had a great comment there about them grabbing a beer and a whiteboard with an investor. A lot of investors in the community, especially here in Western Canada, very willing to do that for you. Just reach out, ask them for help, right? Ask them, hey, I just want to work through this pitch deck with you. But thinking about that other part of the question, where you're thinking the amount of funding needed to get all the way to exit could be quite vast. And you're going to start with Paramita and go through maybe the whole panelists here. How do you articulate, sort of the steps needed and the fact that, and particularly, especially those investors at the early stage to take a bet on you, knowing that maybe you're going to need to raise, 50, 100 million to get all the way to the end. Right. So Paramita, what from your experience working with, variety of different startups at different stages, how do the best go about doing that?
The best go about doing that in smaller pockets. So again, connecting to, and this is something that, as Sabina mentioned, again, pitching is something that a startup is going to do every single day, because you have to meet with investors. Even if you have runway, you have to continue to think about where is that going? And so you have to be continuously raising capital. The moment somebody starts thinking about, oh, I need $5 million or something, then it becomes difficult. One of the things around life sciences companies, particularly if they are in the pharmaceuticals, therapeutics, or natural health, medical devices, diagnostics, not digital health, because again, as Arden said, digital health falls within a SaaS umbrella. So it's a different model somewhat. There are some of the other ones which have regulatory needs. There are different ways in which to tackle them. I'll give an example. There's a medical device, a diagnostic company. In order to be able to raise the amount of money for them to be doing the clinical trial that was needed, that was a lot of money. But they realized that there is actually an easier pathway in as a wellness device, because there's less amount of regulatory hurdles there. So understanding the pathway and how much amount of money is needed, because it's not the fact that you can start a clinical trial and then go on raising money. That's not how clinical trials work. You have to know how, you have to plan out the entire trial, who's the principal investigator, who's the monitor. So there's a pot of money which is needed for that. If somebody does not have the connections or to get there, they can start by showing traction. They can do it in a different way, and then, but keeping that end in mind, that's where I want to go. So once people start doing that, it's an easier way for them to raise smaller amounts of money and capital. And that's also another reason why API partnered with TNT for the Life Sciences Investment Summit, because there are several companies. For instance, one of them is a winner of, I think, the largest paycheck for TNT, which is near, and his Pulse Medica. And I was just talking to him yesterday about some of the things that he was thinking about, but they have raised significant amount of money in the millions of dollars. But they started off through getting smaller packets of money coming from angel investors for their product from TNT. So thinking about it as I need $20 million at the beginning, that might become too inhibitory, and you might be self-selecting yourself out because it's a huge mountain. But it's just the same way as summiting a mountain, I guess. I'll give you a hiking example, and then you take it step by step and then you are there.
Yeah, great advice there, Paramita. Thinking we're breaking it down, it's like, how do you eat an elephant? Just one bite at a time, right? Arden, coming to you, thinking about with pitch decks, right? We've got the pitch that you see virtually, or in person sometimes if they're doing the presentation, and then sometimes you got the pitch that you get emailed to you. It's often called a leave behind pitch deck. How should our founders here be thinking about the differences between those two types of decks? And what do they need to put into the deck in order to make sure that they get that first meeting with you as an investor?
That's an interesting question. There's a difference between the two types of presentations, and I would say often, if you're truly doing a presentation, right, pitching, the focus should be on you as the founder. Whatever you have on your slide should just be for background and supporting what you're talking about, maybe a bit of a guide for you in terms of where you are in the conversation. The more text that you have up on the screen, the more distracted the viewer is going to be, whether it's in person or online, and they're not going to be paying attention to you. So you don't get that opportunity to connect because they're basically just trying to read all the detail, which rarely ever happens. The worst thing is when somebody puts a huge graph or chart or table, and then they'll say, "Well, I'm really sorry about putting all this data up there." And my first thought is, "Well, then why did you do it?" Right? Just give me the headline. The data can come later in a data room when we're going into due diligence. What we want to know is the high level. So, you know, I think like any other startup pitch or industry, if you want to capture the investor's attention, you got to show them, what are you doing differently? What kind of problem are you solving and how are you doing it differently? And again, how well do you understand the whole path from start to potential finish? And so I think even in a leave behind deck, you can leave a bit more detailed material. But we investors look at so many pitch decks, right? And we want to see the headlines. And if we're interested and we think that you're solving an interesting problem, and there's something like you have something unique to you, like I said, like a strategic investor already involved, or you've received. I was going to mention when it comes to the funding gap, don't discount non-dilutive and for not only grants but foundations, right? Foundations are there to get you going at the very early stages when the risk is highest. Private investors will more likely come in, especially institutional funds, once you start showing some more data and de-risk it a bit. So at the very, very beginning and getting out the gate, it is friends and family, it is potentially angel investors. But again, there's a lot of foundations and grants out there that are there to support that stage. So being able to show that, and I think again, for us, to get our attention, just I want to be able to read the headlines and understand what you're doing, what's different about your approach, and what advantage what tailwinds you have behind you. Again, so it's like, we've got our 510(k) application in and it's looking good, or we're already talking to an insurer, that's ready to do reimbursement. It might be or it might be earlier than that. It might be, we've had some really good data come out of our preclinical. Show something that beyond just your idea, and the investor can always come in later with more questions or dig into your data once they need to. I think it's also important I'll throw in there is understand the investors you're pitching to. First of all, venture capital is really hard to raise, period. It's even harder in life sciences. And that's because, I'm sure as Sabina will attest to, most venture capitalists, especially here in Alberta, are not very savvy on life sciences. And they tend to stay away from it. Either they don't understand it, or they think that it's too long of a life cycle. Everybody's looking for a B2B enterprise SaaS software. That's where a majority of early stage venture is here. And that's the reality. So to be successful, number one, you need to understand if an investor looks at life sciences, first of all, are there any in their portfolio? When you look at the Accelerate Fund, we've done 5-6 investments in the life sciences sector. So we are definitely diving in more. But you're likely going to have to go out of the province. And you're going to have to look for investors that aren't here in Alberta for now. We're working to change that. Over time, there's a few of us that Thin Air Labs. Crystal Phillips is amazing. I have all the time in the world for Crystal. But know who you're pitching, and if they are, that way you don't waste your time. And if they are a life sciences investor, if their team is full of PhDs, then go ahead, give them the detail, we'll understand. But if they're an investor that looks at life sciences, but you're seeing that they're not necessarily industry experts, you might not want to go that deep into detail because most likely they will access a network of experts to evaluate your science when it gets to that point.
Awesome. Some great advice there. Sabina, just want to maybe hear your thoughts in the
I
similar.
was going to say, don't even ask me a question. I want to jump on all kinds of things that
Yeah.
I'm.
Go ahead. Yeah.
so much in there. I think at the core of it is you have to know your story cold, and you have to know your investor, and your story changes with your investor, and you have to demonstrate the ability to do that on a dime. So for your pitch, it has to tell a story, but it has to tell a story 10 ways. It's like one of those annoying books that like go to page 54 and the guy dies and then go to whatever, right? The read from the back stories. Because if an investor touches on a particular point, or they open on a particular point, or they're a particular type of investor, your story has to start from there and then build up. Don't be like, well, let's just sit down through the part that you don't care about. I'm going to get there. The ability to show that, listen, let's just skip right to page 10, and then I'm going to touch on that and then fill in the rest. You still have to make sure that they're not lost and that you can tell the story from that starting point, but grabbing their attention right away shows that you know who they are and that you know your stuff really, really cold. If you're just reciting from A to B, it's going to show that you're just reciting from A to B. And I think recognizing that we got our round kicked off with the win. That was our first sort of really solid piece to it. And then at the same time, we had a term sheet from the Bay Area, and then that just rolled out this massive sort of list of follow-ons and things like that. And so in the end, we have 4 US-based venture funds that are in our round, and it's great because it provides a lot of momentum now worldwide for different venture funds, and we can see the impact that it is at bringing home. So I think leveraging home and away, and having those two different mindsets play off each other is so powerful. The US investors have really taught us to think so much bigger than we would have. And the game is so different, and it's so helpful to be in that space. But I have to recognize them for who they are. And each one of them is different. One guy only wants to talk about data. The other one only wants to talk about our food and beverage partners. The other one only wants to talk about, so our story morphs depending on who we're saying, but there's a central business plan that's solid, and it's not, the business plan isn't morphing, but the story is, and that's the key, I think.
Yeah.
You want to, I'm just going to say one thing right now. I think our biggest strength is that we have different investors with different interests, and so it allows our company a lot of flexibility to move in the directions that we want. They're not all, they haven't all bought in for the same reasons, and that's really helpful. And that's a strength to the story.
Yeah. No, I love that, like having that central through line, that theme to the story being, the central reason for why you're building the business, but then adapting and finding those threads that different investors want to tug on, and letting them tug on it. Cognizant of the time here, I just want to maybe quickly run through the panel. We'll go Arden, Sabina, we'll give Paramita the last word here. We got talked about all kinds of do's. Here's the things you should do. Any major don'ts from your experience that they definitely need to avoid? Common mistakes that you see in pitch decks that it's like, hey, make sure you don't do this. All right, and to end us off here.
More of a general principle, I guess, or thought is, it doesn't matter how good your science is, doesn't matter how good your product is or your story is, if your deal structure is off. And what I mean by that is, a great company can be a bad investment if the terms or the type of investment or your cap table is let's just say non-standard, right? For example, if you have a large chunk of debt overhanging your company at an early stage, or if there's all kinds of scenarios. But I think what's important to go talk to an investor early on. There's a lot of us out here who are very willing to talk to you and help. Like, don't approach investors at the time you need investment. Start asking them about how they look at a deal and what would keep them from getting in. I've seen a number of companies that were fantastic products and technologies, but when you look at how the convertible note was structured, or again, something like the capital stack, we looked at it and like the risk of us not being able to make any money on it was high and we couldn't get in. And so the deal structure is just as important as the company itself.
Awesome. Yeah, I 100% agree there. We've had lots of deals with TNT fall through. We love the founder, we love the company, we love the technology. Cannot make a deal work at a valuation that was reasonable. Sabina, any other major common mistakes?
Yeah, don't think you have all the answers. Don't think you're that amazing. Don't think you're not threatened by your competition. Don't think that you're not already out of time. Be vulnerable, be humble, show places where you've made mistakes and how you've corrected it, and don't be so pitch perfect. Show that you're real and that you can respond to threats and a sense of urgency.
Yeah, love that. One of my favorite little nuggets that I remember learning was Warren Buffett every year. He always starts out with, "Here's the mistakes I made," when he talks about it in his investor statement. Builds a lot of trust, as we talked about trust. I love being able to hear from my founders. Here's the things I'm actually struggling with. We had a company recently that said, "Hey, we had to lay off a couple employees because they weren't the right fit. We're struggling to find some new people to fit in." Love hearing that kind of stuff because it shows me that that you're willing and vulnerable, and you're willing to learn. Paramita, last word. Any common mistakes you've seen that founders should avoid in their pitches?
Absolutely, yes. And particularly for life sciences companies, one of them is thinking about it as a presentation. So rather than making it a pitch, founders would put a lot of data. As Arden mentioned, give the high-level story and not necessarily all the data, because that can go into the data room. So that is something which is very critical. Another thing that I've seen is people think about that long-term ask of a $5 million. And when they are giving out their ask, I'm looking for $5 million. So it goes down to, do you really understand your investor? Do you know if they have, this is the check size? Because if they are not, then asking them for $5 million, it's just directly going to go into that out pile. And it's not going to go anywhere. You have not built trust or anything. And you're just asking them directly for money and giving them a lot of data and not necessarily something to bite down on. So those are the two things I would say are the things I've seen life sciences companies do quite often, and which is something that investors would not like at all.
Awesome. Thank you. And we are at the end of our time here. So grateful. Big round of applause to all of our panelists. Thank you so much for spending the time today with us, Paramita, Sabina, and Arden. So much great wisdom. If you wouldn't mind throwing maybe your LinkedIn in the chat, I'm sure lots of folks would like to reach out, connect with you, however you would prefer them to do so. And of course, you can often catch these folks at a TNT happy hour near you. We're in Edmonton, Calgary, Saskatoon, Regina, and Winnipeg every Thursday night. So come on out tonight at 6 o'clock local time. And lots of people are saying, "Hey, I want to meet investors, talk to investors, talk to other founders, get some coaching." Best way to do it over a drink, non-alcoholic or alcoholic, doesn't matter. You can come and join us. Just show up. That's our motto. So thank you so much, everybody. And get those applications in. January 15th is the deadline for the Life Sciences Summit. You want to get some feedback on your deck, feedback on your company. Great way to do it is to come through the summit process. So yeah, thank you very much, everybody. Have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, Jesse. Bye, everybody.
Thanks,
Thank
everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.